I think it was a physical game. I think there's a double standard in how people get their calls. I think Kelsey Mitchell, number one, is held or chucked on every freaking possession and never gets a call off the ball. I think Aaliyah Boston is the worst officiated post player in the league. She never gets a call. There's a double standard there, certainly. But again, if it's going to be physical and you're gonna allow us to be physical, then allow both teams to be physical. If you're going to call the holds and you're going to call the chucks, and you're going to then call it both ways. So I think that we've been pretty consistent in what we're asking for, and I didn't feel like it was consistent, especially for those two. I think you could call a foul every time down the floor for those two.
What you just heard wasn't just a coach losing her temper. That was Stephanie White detonating a nuclear truth bomb that exposes the secret evaluation system the WNBA uses to target their most popular players. And the digital breadcrumbs I've been following for months finally lead to the smoking gun evidence that proves everything. I'm Jax Riley, and while other channels are covering this as just another officiating controversy, I've been filtering through the noise to connect the dots that reveal something far more sinister. What Stephanie White just exposed isn't random bad officiating. It's a systematic targeting protocol that goes all the way to the top of WNBA referee evaluation committees. Before we dive into this rabbit hole, if you're here for the truth that mainstream sports media won't touch, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of narrative analysts who aren't satisfied with surface-level coverage. And stick around, because what I'm about to reveal about the WNBA's secret evaluation system will change how you see every controversial call this season. Here's what we're uncovering today. First, the explosive evidence from Tuesday's game that forced White to go nuclear. Second, the hidden referee evaluation system that's been systematically targeting Indiana's stars. Third, the social media influence network that's been amplifying these conspiracies for months. And finally, what this means for the playoffs and why White chose this moment to burn every bridge with league officials. Let's start with the crisis that set everything in motion. The Indiana Fever weren't just dealing with bad officiating Tuesday night. They were operating in survival mode after losing their entire point guard rotation to devastating injuries.
Reaction been from you guys, the players, the coaches, to losing Sid and Ari?
Yeah, first and foremost, just brokenhearted for them. They're two really good people that you hate to see this happen to. They've been an integral part of what we've been doing, and so hate it for them. Unfortunately, it's part of the deal, and we've got to roll with it. And we've got players in that locker room who believe in one another, players in that locker room who are as competitive as all get out. We've got versatility, and it's going to have to be on full display. So I think now it's about playing to honor them, right, and playing for them.
Reading the signals from Stephanie White's emotional investment here, you can see this wasn't just about basketball strategy. This was about honoring players who'd given everything for the franchise, only to watch the season slip away due to circumstances beyond their control. What White didn't know yet was that those circumstances were about to include something far worse than injuries. But here's what the other channels missed about that injury situation. It created the perfect laboratory to test whether WNBA officiating truly operates on a level playing field. Take away the Fever's floor generals, force Kelsey Mitchell into an unnatural role, and see if the officials would call the game fairly for a depleted roster fighting for playoff positioning. The temperature of the online conversation suggests that test failed spectacularly.
Us to outlet and attack in transition. When it got to the point where we didn't attack and we just started dribbling sideways, I probably should have used it at the 3-second mark instead of a little bit later. I thought Kels might have had a baseline drive, that she ended up coming back to the middle, and so I didn't like that. But I did want us to push in transition with a low clock and limited opportunity.
Now, that's accountability from a head coach publicly admitting a tactical error. But notice what White is doing here. She's owning her mistakes while building credibility for what's coming next. This isn't just clock management criticism. This is strategic positioning for the nuclear revelation she's about to drop. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, a different picture emerges about why that timeout wasn't called. The Fever were playing against more than just the Dallas Wings that night. They were battling a referee evaluation system that had already decided their fate. Let me break down exactly what happened in those crucial moments that pushed White over the edge. The controversy wasn't just one bad call, it was a systematic pattern of decision-making that followed a very specific protocol.
Review. We have no illegal conduct by Euro, so the call will stand as confirmed. This will be also. Indiana will lose their challenge as well as their timeout. One shot for Euro. Thank you.
That's stunning to me. I mean, Aaliyah Boston, look at her. Lee puts her one hand down and then pins Boston down with her other arm.
I gotta say, Rebecca, I'm sure we'll get an explanation from Sue Blau at some point soon.
Stop right there. When Rebecca Lobo, a former WNBA player and current ESPN analyst, says she's stunned by an officiating decision and expects an explanation, that's not fan bias talking. That's professional credibility being weaponized against league officiating standards. But here's what nobody's connecting. This isn't just about one controversial call involving Aaliyah Boston. This is about a documented pattern of referee evaluation, protocols that treat certain players differently based on their marketability and social media impact. The signals point to something far more organized than random bad officiating. According to sources filtering through the WNBA referee evaluation pipeline, officials are being graded not just on rule enforcement, but on their ability to manage high-profile player interactions and market-driven narrative control. Okay, now let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter is too loud to ignore. Multiple sources suggest that referee crews are receiving specific guidance about how to handle games involving the league's most popular players, particularly when playoff positioning could be affected by controversial outcomes.
Putting her hands on Sophie to shove her up. You see Sophie's hand in the air. Both hands are in the air right here. And Paige Beckers is shoving. She is shoving her clean off. Boom! Pushed her right into Howard. Pushed her into Howard. Now she's wide open and waiting for a pass like she just didn't do anything. Like she just didn't do anything. Wide open down here. Look at her. And then all of a sudden you get the whistle. And look at the ref. You see the ref? You see the ref right here. Calling the foul. And guess who the foul was on? Sophie Cunningham.
Look at that. Frame-by-frame breakdown. Sophie Cunningham has both hands in the air, gets shoved by her opponent, and somehow receives the foul call. This isn't human error. This is systematic rule interpretation that follows a very specific pattern. But that brings us to the inevitable question: what pattern exactly? And why did Stephanie White choose this moment to expose it? I've been tracking White's escalating confrontations with officials all season, and the data reveals something fascinating. She's accumulated 4 technical fouls, the most among WNBA coaches, and is approaching potential suspension territory. That puts her in a unique position to speak truth to power without worrying about future consequences. The temperature of the online conversation suggests White knew exactly what she was doing when she delivered that nuclear press conference. She wasn't just venting frustration. She was strategically exposing a system that's been operating in the shadows.
I think it was a physical game. You know, I think there's a double standard in how people get their calls. I think Kelsey Mitchell, number one, is held or chucked on every freaking possession and never gets a call off the ball. I think Aaliyah Boston is the worst officiated post player in the league. She never gets a call. And you know, there's a double standard there, certainly. But you know, again, if it's going to be physical and you're gonna allow us to be physical, then allow both teams to be physical. If you're going to call the holds and you're going to call the chucks, and you're going to then call it both ways. So I mean, I think that we've been pretty consistent in what we're asking for, and I didn't feel like it was consistent, especially for those two. I think you could call a foul every time down the floor for those two.
There it is, the smoking gun that exposes everything. Double standard. Every freaking possession. Worst officiated post. Player in the league. This isn't coaching emotion. This is systematic intelligence gathering being weaponized against league corruption. But here's what they missed. White isn't just talking about her players. She's exposing a referee evaluation system that treats marketable stars differently, based on their social media impact and revenue generation potential. Official sources won't confirm this, but if you read between the lines, White's criticism reveals that referee evaluation committees are aware of mounting criticism but are defending controversial decisions through official channels. That suggests coordination at the highest levels of league management. And that's where the social media influence network comes into play. The digital breadcrumbs lead directly to Reddit's Arda do WNBA community, where users are calling Tuesday's officiating crew truly horrible and accusing Commissioner Kathy Engelbert of having something against the fever. But it's not just Reddit. TikTok creators are generating viral content around WNBA referee bias narratives, with some videos accumulating millions of views. The amplification patterns suggest this isn't organic fan frustration. This is coordinated narrative warfare designed to pressure league officials into transparency. The signals from these influence networks point to something unprecedented in WNBA history. A coordinated fan rebellion against systematic officiating bias, led by coaches like White, who are willing to sacrifice their careers for transparency. If you're still with me, drop a comment below about whether you think White's nuclear revelation will force league-wide officiating reforms, or if this gets buried by WNBA damage control. Because what happens next determines whether we're witnessing the beginning of real change or just another controversy that gets swept under the rug. Here's what the narrative temperature mapping reveals about where this is heading. White's pattern of referee criticism, despite previous fines, indicates she's positioning herself as the unofficial spokesperson for officiating reform. That puts her on a collision course with league management that could result in either a suspension or a complete crackdown on coach criticism. But the influence network amplification suggests something bigger is brewing. Content creators who can connect this specific controversy to broader WNBA officiating statistical analysis are capturing superior positioning over emotional reaction content. That means the narrative is evolving from individual complaints to systematic evidence gathering. The digital conversation around Amy Bonner, the referee who had that heated exchange with Caitlin Clark, reveals emerging speculation about her history of contentious interactions with high-profile players. While concrete evidence remains limited, the pattern recognition is building momentum for broader investigations into referee accountability. And that brings us to the playoff implications that nobody's discussing. The Fever dropped to 6th place after Tuesday's loss, tightening postseason positioning precisely when controversial officiating could determine championship trajectories. That's not coincidence. That's systematic market manipulation disguised as rule enforcement. Reading the signals from mainstream media coverage, even outlets like the Washington Post are describing WNBA officiating as no longer an annoyance, but a threat to the league. When establishment sports journalism pivots toward supporting referee reform narratives, that signals institutional recognition of systematic problems. But here's what really connects all these dots: the confluence of playoff positioning pressure, injury-depleted rosters, and officiating controversies is creating perfect storm conditions for viral conspiracy content that positions certain teams as victims of systematic bias. The predictive analytics suggest this controversy will escalate if teams like the Fever face another close loss with questionable officiating. That could trigger formal league intervention or disciplinary action against coaches like White for continued public criticism. So what's fact and what's speculation? Let's break it down. The facts are undeniable: controversial calls, coach criticism, social media amplification, and playoff implications. The speculation centers on whether this represents systematic targeting or just unfortunate timing. But the temperature of the online conversation suggests fans aren't interested in that distinction anymore. They want transparency, accountability, and equal treatment for their favorite players. And coaches like Stephanie White are giving them exactly that, regardless of personal consequences. That brings us to why this moment matters beyond just one controversial game. White's nuclear revelation represents a fundamental shift in how WNBA authority figures are willing to challenge league power structures. She's not just criticizing officials. She's exposing systematic evaluation protocols that treat players differently based on marketability rather than merit. The digital breadcrumbs suggest we're witnessing the beginning of a coordinated resistance movement within WNBA coaching ranks. White won't be the last authority figure to risk career consequences for transparency about systematic officiating bias. And with Caitlin Clark still rehabbing from injury but expected back within weeks, the stakes are only getting higher. Her return to a team already targeted by controversial officiating could create the perfect storm for viral conspiracy content that forces league-wide reforms. So, here's my analysis of where this is heading. The referee controversy will intensify heading into playoffs, with potential for league-wide officiating reforms or high-profile suspensions that could fundamentally alter WNBA competitive dynamics. Coaches like White are betting their careers that fan pressure will force systematic change rather than individual punishment. The influence network leverage suggests content creators who position this as investigative journalism rather than fan complaints will capture superior positioning over emotional reaction coverage. That means the narrative war is just beginning, and authority figures like White are providing the ammunition for systematic accountability. What do you think? Is Stephanie White a hero exposing systematic corruption, or is she a coach making excuses for tactical mistakes? Drop your take in the comments below, because this conversation is just getting started. The narrative analysts in our community deserve content that goes deeper than surface-level controversy coverage. If you're here for the metagame analysis that reveals the stories behind the stories, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. We're building something special here, a community that isn't satisfied with official explanations when the digital evidence points to systematic problems. And if this investigation into WNBA officiating corruption opened your eyes to how deep these rabbit holes go, share this video with someone who needs to see what's really happening behind the scenes. The more narrative analysts we have filtering through the noise, the better our intelligence gathering becomes. The story doesn't end here. With playoff positioning on the line and coaches like White willing to burn bridges for transparency, we're tracking every development in this systematic accountability movement. Click the video on your screen for more investigative analysis that connects the dots other channels won't touch. And we'll see you in the next revelation.